Life can change in a second. One minute, I was Olivia, a 33-year-old financial executive with a happy marriage, planning a romantic escape to Hawaii with my husband Julian. The next, I was a widow, sitting in a lawyer's office and staring blankly at his will. Julian had died 7 months ago in a devastating plane crash. Since then, I had been drowning in grief, trying to navigate this new, painful reality. But his death, as tragic as it was, wasn't the most shocking part of my story. The true nightmare began with a phone call, an invitation to a family event that turned into the most humiliating betrayal of my life. I was at my parents' house for my younger sister Eleanor's gender reveal party. She stood there, 8 months pregnant, basking in the spotlight she always craved. Then, she dropped a bombshell that shattered my world into a million pieces. She claimed the baby was Julian's and demanded half of his $60 million estate. As she spoke, surrounded by my smiling parents, I felt a chilling rage replace my grief. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I just laughed. A cold, hard laugh that was born from pure disbelief. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a calculated con, and I knew right then that I was going to expose every single lie. Before the veil was lifted on my husband's secret life, my world was a portrait of polished, modern success. My name is Olivia, and at 33, I felt like I had it all. By day, I was a senior financial executive at a prestigious firm in Chicago, where I managed portfolios and navigated high-stakes deals. My career was my passion, a testament to years of hard work and ambition. By night, I came home to a beautiful, light-filled house in the Lakeview neighborhood that Julian and I had meticulously renovated. He was the love of my life, a charismatic and brilliant tech entrepreneur whose company was on the verge of its next big breakthrough. We were a power couple, or so I thought. Our love story felt like something out of a movie. We met at a charity gala, and our connection was instant and electric. We bonded over our shared drive and ambition, and our future seemed limitless. We had all the hallmarks of a perfect life: weekend getaways to Napa, spontaneous date nights at our favorite downtown restaurant, and long evenings spent on our patio, dreaming about the future. Our greatest hope was to start a family. We had been trying for years, and it was a journey filled with both hope and heartbreak. I endured countless doctor's appointments and painful fertility treatments, feeling a pressure that was both self-imposed and subtly reinforced by our families. Julian was always there, holding my hand, telling me that we were a team and that everything would be okay. He was so supportive, so tender, and so understanding. He would say, "A child would be a blessing, but having you is the only thing that truly matters." Looking back now, his words feel like a cruel mockery, but at the time, they were the anchors that held me steady. My relationship with my family, however, was a different story. I was the eldest daughter, always striving for my parents' approval, but rarely feeling like I earned it. My younger sister, Eleanor, was the star of the family, a former aspiring model who, after a series of failed ventures and bad choices, always seemed to be in need of rescue. While I was busy building my career, Eleanor was busy being the center of attention. My parents, in their endless effort to support her, would constantly ask me for money, and I, out of a deep-seated need for their love, would provide it without question. I saw the relief in their eyes, the gratitude, and for a while, I felt like I was finally earning my place in their hearts. Weekly dinners at their house, once a source of quiet anxiety, became something I looked forward to. My father would actually ask about my work, and my mother would cook my favorite meals. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen by them, not just as a reliable paycheck, but as their daughter. There were small cracks in this polished facade, little things I chose to ignore. Julian's frequent business trips, especially those to Europe, felt more frequent than necessary. He'd sometimes be vague about his schedule or details of his meetings, brushing it off as corporate confidentiality. He also had a strained relationship with his family, claiming his parents had died when he was young and he had grown up in foster care. He was a survivor, a self-made man, and I admired him for it. I believed him completely. My parents, too, seemed to have an unusually close relationship with Eleanor, even as they took my money to support her. But I brushed it all aside. I wanted to believe in the perfect life I had built. I wanted to believe in the love of my husband and the affection of my family. I never thought to question it. After all, why would I? The ground I was standing on felt solid. It was only after Julian was gone that I realized the ground wasn't solid at all. It was quicksand, and I was sinking fast. The ground beneath me didn't just crack. It gave way entirely on a crisp Saturday afternoon, 7 months after Julian's death. The initial shock of his passing had dulled into a constant, heavy ache. But my life had found a new, quiet rhythm. I was still working part-time, seeking solace in the mundane and trying to heal with the help of a grief support group. My family, my parents, and my sister Eleanor had been uncharacteristically attentive. They had become my lifeline, the one constant in a world turned upside down. I had no reason to question their sudden closeness. In fact, I welcomed it, clinging to the idea that in my darkest hour, family was all that mattered. This is why I didn't hesitate to accept their invitation to Eleanor's gender reveal party. She had been 8 months pregnant, and the identity of the father had been a carefully guarded secret. I had been worried about her, of course. Eleanor had a long history of making poor decisions, and a baby with an unknown father seemed like another chapter in her chaotic life. Yet, as I pulled up to my parents' suburban Chicago home, decorated with pink and blue balloons and streamers, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was a chance for us to finally be a real family. I brought a beautiful, handcrafted baby blanket I had spent weeks knitting, a silent peace offering. The party was in full swing, a loud, pastel-colored blur of family friends and neighbors. Eleanor, radiant and smug, was the center of attention as always. My parents fussed over her, moving me aside to make space for their favorite daughter. I felt that familiar old ache of being invisible again. But I pushed it down. It's about her today, I told myself, a mantra I'd repeated my entire life. As the moment of the reveal approached, Eleanor stood on a small platform in the middle of the garden, holding a giant black balloon. The crowd gathered, phones raised, eagerly awaiting the burst of color that would decide the baby's fate. Eleanor's eyes met mine across the crowd, and I saw a cold, calculated glint in them that should have been a warning. But I was still too naive to read the signs. With a dramatic flourish, she pricked the balloon, and a shower of blue confetti rained down on us. "It's a boy," the crowd cheered. Then, silence. Eleanor held up her hands to quiet the guests, a sly, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Before we get back to the party," she said, her voice carrying a practiced theatricality, "there's something very important I need to tell everyone. I think it's time you all knew who the father of my baby is." My heart pounded against my ribs, a sudden sense of dread washing over me. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was nothing, but a cold chill ran down my spine. Eleanor looked directly at me, her smile hardening. "The father," she announced, her voice ringing through the silent yard, "is Julian Shaw." My husband's name. It hung in the air, a punch in the gut. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt the world tilt on its axis. Gasps and whispers erupted around me. Aunt Sarah covered her mouth in shock. My boss's wife, who I was friendly with, looked at me with a mix of pity and morbid curiosity, and then the ultimate betrayal. I looked at my parents, and their faces held not shock, but a calm, rehearsed serenity. They knew. They had known all along. Before I could even process what was happening, Eleanor kept going, a venomous pride in her voice. And since this baby is Julian's only child, I am legally entitled to half of his entire estate. That means the house, the apartment, the $60 million, everything. My son deserves his inheritance. I swayed, grabbing a garden chair to steady myself. My father stepped forward, putting a hand on Eleanor's shoulder, a protective gesture that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. "Olivia, honey," he said, using a tone of fake concern. "You need to do the right thing. Your nephew deserves what belongs to him." "You're lying," I whispered, the words scratching my throat. "All of you are lying. Julian would never." Eleanor's smile turned into a sneer. She pulled out her phone and held up the screen for everyone to see. There they were, photos of her and Julian, kissing in what looked like a hotel room I didn't recognize. Another showed them holding hands at a fancy restaurant. A fresh wave of nausea hit me. "He loved me," she said, her voice dripping with fake tears. "He was going to leave you for me. We were planning to tell you after the divorce, but then the accident happened." Her performance was a masterpiece of deceit. I couldn't stand it. The air was thick with the scent of betrayal. My body moved on its own. I grabbed my purse, pushed through the stunned crowd, and stumbled blindly to my car. I heard my mother calling my name, but I was already backing out of the driveway, the sound of her voice a hollow, meaningless echo. The drive home was a blur of tears and raw, unfiltered pain. My mind replayed the images, the restaurant dinners Julian had always called business meetings, the hotel stays that were work trips. The moment I walked into my house, my phone started buzzing. It was Eleanor spamming my inbox with screenshots of her chats with Julian. "I don't love her anymore," one message read. "We'll tell everyone after the divorce." "You're the only one I want." The messages went back for months, each one a fresh cut to my soul. While I was struggling with painful fertility treatments, thinking I was the reason we couldn't have children, my husband and my sister were planning a future without me. The final gut punch came at 6 a.m. the next morning, my parents. "Olivia, you need to be reasonable about this," my father's voice, cold and confident, said on the phone. "The sooner you agree to give Eleanor her share, the easier this will be for everyone." "Easier for who?" I asked, my voice shaking. "For you?" "For all of you?" "We've known for a while," my mother confessed, her words a hammer blow to my heart. "Julian told us 7 months before the accident." 7 months. They knew. And for 7 months, they had let me cry on their shoulders, let me grieve for the man they knew had betrayed me, all while they continued to take the money I sent them. The word traitors felt cold and final. I hung up the phone, blocked their numbers, and, with trembling hands, stopped the monthly financial transfers I had been sending them for years. If they needed money, they could go ask their beloved Eleanor. My marriage and my family, the two cornerstones of my life, had just been proven to be nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. The weeks that followed the gender reveal party were a blur of pain, disbelief, and a suffocating silence. My phone, once a constant lifeline, was now a dead object. Its screen dark and silent after I had blocked my parents and Eleanor. This self-imposed solitude was both a prison and a sanctuary. I couldn't face anyone. The thought of stepping outside and running into a neighbor who had been at the party, their eyes filled with pity and morbid curiosity, was unbearable. The world I had known, the people I had trusted, had become a minefield of emotional traps. I went on autopilot, a hollow shell going through the motions. My grief for Julian had been replaced by a bitter, burning rage. Every corner of our beautiful home, every photograph on the wall, every memory we had shared felt tainted. Was any of it real? Or was it all a performance, a decade-long lie that I was too blind to see? I spent countless hours in the quiet house, sitting on the sofa, staring at the pictures of us laughing and searching for the cracks I had so naively ignored. I replayed Julian's words in my head, his reassurances during my fertility treatments, his vague explanations for his business trips. The loving words now sounded like a cruel, calculated script. The realization that I had been living a carefully constructed delusion for 10 years was a betrayal far deeper than his affair with Eleanor. It was a betrayal of my entire existence. My colleagues at the financial firm were a different kind of challenge. The whispers started almost immediately. I could feel their eyes on me, their hushed conversations stopping the moment I entered a room. Some offered me sympathetic glances, while others wore barely concealed smirks. I had always been known for my professionalism and poise, but now I was the subject of an office scandal. It was too much. During a client meeting, I broke down. My boss, Larry, a man who had become one of my few true friends, pulled me into his office. "Olivia," he said, his voice gentle, "take some time off. Paid or unpaid, whatever you need. Your job will be here when you're ready." I nodded, grateful for his kindness, and packed my things. It was a temporary retreat, but a necessary one. I needed to disappear to survive. For the next few weeks, I barely left the house. I had groceries delivered and ignored the doorbell. My grief was no longer a silent pain. It was a screaming monster in my head. I was a victim, a fool, a woman who had lost everything. But then, one morning, something shifted. I was looking at a photo of Julian and me on our wedding day. I saw my own face, radiant and full of hope. And I realized that that woman, the woman in the picture, was still inside me. She was strong, she was smart, and she was not going to be broken by a lie. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize in my heart. My silence was not weakness. It was a weapon. They thought I was crumbling, that I would give in and hand over half of Julian's fortune to their greedy hands. They were wrong. I started to work in secret. My first move was a simple one, but it was profoundly empowering. I opened a new bank account, a private one, and transferred all of my personal funds into it. It was a small act, but it felt like I was building my own fortress. My next step was more strategic. I started to research inheritance lawyers in Chicago. I met with several high-profile attorneys, each with their own promises and price tags. I was looking for more than just a lawyer. I was looking for a warrior. I found him in Marcus Thorne. He was an older man with a calm demeanor and a reputation for being a shark in the courtroom. He listened patiently as I laid out the whole sordid story. Julian's death, Eleanor's claim, my parents' betrayal, the incriminating photos and text messages. He didn't interrupt, his face remaining impassive. When I finished, he took off his glasses and looked me straight in the eye. "Ms. Shaw," he said, "your sister has a strong case. The evidence of a relationship, a biological child, your parents' testimony, it all paints a very sympathetic picture for her. You will be fighting an uphill battle." His honesty, far from discouraging me, solidified my resolve. I wasn't looking for a fairy tale ending. I was looking for the truth. "I understand," I told him, my voice steady. But I also know that there's more to this story. Julian was a very private man, and he was a very, very smart man. I believe he wouldn't have left himself completely exposed like this. Marcus nodded, a flicker of professional interest in his eyes. He agreed to take my case. While Marcus began his legal preparations, I began my own investigation. I became a detective in my own home. I started sifting through Julian's belongings, not for sentimental value, but for clues. I went through his financial statements, his travel records, his business documents. My professional background in finance gave me an edge. I knew how to look for irregularities. The biggest anomaly was a series of frequent trips Julian had made to Zurich, Switzerland. He had always claimed they were for strategic partner meetings, but his company had no known operations there. The expenses were discreet, filed under a separate account, and there were no meeting agendas or reports to back them up. It was a pattern that screamed secret. I also started doing a deep dive into Julian's past. He had always told me he was an orphan who grew up in foster care. A part of me had always admired his resilience and how he had built his life from nothing. But now, I saw it as a potential lie. I hired a private investigator to look into his past, focusing on any records from his childhood. I was meticulously building my case, not with emotion, but with facts. The hardest part was keeping my plan to myself. Every day, Eleanor's lawyer would send me emails with increasingly aggressive demands. My parents would try to reach me through mutual friends, leaving messages filled with fake concern. I ignored them all. I wanted them to think they had won. I wanted them to believe I was a broken, grieving widow who would eventually give in. I wanted them to get comfortable in their delusion. I let the silence be my armor, and the burning desire for justice be my sword. I was no longer a victim. I was a quiet force, gathering my strength and preparing for the fight of my life. The day of the court hearing was a cold, somber affair, mirroring the mood that had settled over my life for the past 9 months. I arrived at the Chicago courthouse, not as a broken woman, but as a warrior ready for battle. I was dressed in a sharp tailored navy suit, a stark contrast to the grief-stricken attire I had worn for Julian's funeral. I sat beside Marcus Thorne, my lawyer, who exuded an air of calm authority. His presence alone was a comfort. A quiet promise that we were here to win. Across the courtroom, Eleanor sat with the poise of a saint, a perfectly manufactured picture of innocence and sorrow. She was dressed in a simple black dress, and in her arms she cradled the now 2-month-old baby, a tiny, silent prop in her grand performance. The child was wrapped in the very same handcrafted blanket I had given her at the gender reveal party. My parents sat next to her, their faces a mixture of solemnity and barely disguised satisfaction. They truly believed they were on the winning side, a part of a new, prosperous family with a generous inheritance. The sheer audacity of their betrayal was a fire in my veins, but I kept my face a mask of cool indifference. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Eleanor's lawyer, a man with a smug demeanor and a carefully rehearsed delivery, began his opening statement. He spoke of Julian as a man caught between two worlds, a man who had found true love with Eleanor, but was unable to leave his wife. He painted a heartbreaking picture of a forbidden romance, a passionate affair that had led to a child, Julian's only heir. The lawyer presented the text messages and the photos as irrefutable evidence, and as he displayed them on a large screen, I felt the familiar sting of humiliation. The images of Julian holding Eleanor's hand and kissing her in hotel rooms were a public spectacle, a final act of betrayal that I was forced to endure. Eleanor played her part flawlessly. her eyes welling with tears as she recounted her deep love for Julian and her heartbreak over his untimely death. She spoke of her son, Julian Jr., and his right to his father's legacy, her voice filled with a tremor that was so convincingly real, it almost made me believe her. When it was my turn, Marcus rose, a silent force of nature. He didn't engage in emotional theatrics. He simply let the facts speak for themselves. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "we have just heard a very compelling and highly emotional narrative from the plaintiff. However, my client and I are here to present the facts, not fiction." He then walked to the judge's bench and, with a respectful nod, handed over a thick, sealed envelope. "I would like to submit a piece of evidence that will dismantle the plaintiff's entire claim." Eleanor's lawyer immediately sprang to his feet, objecting vehemently. "Your Honor, these documents have not been authenticated. They are inadmissible." Marcus, unfazed, addressed the judge directly. "These are authenticated medical records from a reputable clinic in Zurich, Switzerland. We obtained them through a legal process after a private investigation revealed an unusual pattern in Mr. Shaw's travel records." The judge, a no-nonsense woman who seemed unimpressed by emotional appeals, began to review the documents. The color drained from Eleanor's face. She leaned forward in her chair, a look of pure, unadulterated terror replacing her facade of grief. Her lawyer, flustered, continued to protest, but the judge silenced him with a stern glance. Marcus waited patiently until the judge finished reading. "Your Honor," he continued, "these records, dated 11 years ago, a full year before my client's marriage to Julian Shaw, clearly state that Mr. Shaw was diagnosed with complete azoospermia. In layman's terms, he was permanently sterile and unable to father a child through natural means." The entire courtroom erupted in a collective gasp. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. Eleanor's carefully constructed world was crumbling before her eyes. She sprang to her feet, her voice a desperate shriek. "That's a lie! Those papers are fake! She made them up to steal my baby's inheritance!" "On the contrary, Miss Ramsey," Marcus replied, his voice a razor's edge. This diagnosis was a devastating blow to Mr. Shaw, one he spent years concealing from everyone, including my client. He knew he couldn't father a child. Therefore, the child you are holding cannot possibly be his. He then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, since Mr. Shaw's body was cremated, we are requesting a court-ordered DNA test to prove our claim. We have an individual who can provide the necessary genetic material." Eleanor, desperate to regain control, laughed a short, hysterical laugh. "That's impossible. There's no one to test. He was an orphan." She looked at the judge with a false sense of triumph, believing she had outsmarted us. "Actually, Miss Ramsey," Marcus said, turning to the crowd with a triumphant glint in his eye, "Mr. Shaw was not an orphan. He, in fact, has a mother, whom he lied about for over a decade." He gestured toward a woman sitting in the back row. "I would like to introduce Ms. Evelyn Shaw, Julian's biological mother." A wave of shock and confusion swept through the courtroom. My parents stared at the elegant, silver-haired woman in disbelief. I had been in contact with Evelyn for weeks, and she had been the one to provide the medical records. She had found them in a hidden safe while clearing out Julian's old storage unit, a place he had kept secret even from me. Her son had been so ashamed of his diagnosis that he had lied about his entire family history. Evelyn, a woman who had been betrayed by her son's lies and now by Eleanor's greed, was my final, irrefutable witness. She rose, her posture straight and dignified. "I am willing to take a DNA test," she stated clearly, her voice echoing with a quiet authority, "to prove that this child is not my grandson. It's time the truth came out." The judge nodded, a stern expression on her face. A DNA test is ordered. The court will reconvene once the results are in. Eleanor looked like she was about to faint. My mother rushed to her side, giving me a look of pure hatred. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of justice being served. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was once again packed. The tension was palpable. The judge, holding the sealed envelope with the DNA test results, called the court to order. Eleanor sat stiffly in her chair, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She had lost her composure, her act of a grieving mother, now a shattered farce. The judge opened the envelope and read the results aloud, her voice steady and deliberate. The results of the DNA test confirm that there is no genetic connection between the child and Mrs. Evelyn Shaw. Therefore, Julian Shaw is not the father of this child. The entire room erupted in gasps. The baby in Eleanor's arms stirred, disturbed by the sudden noise. Eleanor's carefully applied mascara began to run down her cheeks as tears streamed from her eyes. It was a performance, but this time, it was a performance of pure, unfiltered devastation. My mother, who had been holding Eleanor's hand, recoiled in shock, her face a mask of horror. My father sat motionless, his face a ghostly pale. "Miss Ramsey," the judge said, her voice now sharp and strict. "Do you wish to explain why you have attempted to defraud this court?" Eleanor, her voice weak and broken, confessed to everything. "I was seeing more than one man at the time. When Julian died and was cremated, I thought no one would ever find out. He had money, and I needed it." The words tumbled out, a pathetic admission of her greed and cruelty. "I just wanted my baby to have a good life," she cried, but her act didn't work. The look on my parents' faces was one of complete shock and horror as they finally realized how deeply their favorite daughter had lied and manipulated them. They had lost their golden child and gained nothing but shame. The judge delivered her ruling without hesitation. "This court rules in favor of the defendant, Olivia Shaw. All of Eleanor Ramsey's claims to the estate are dismissed permanently. Miss Ramsey, you are lucky that Ms. Shaw has not pursued legal action for attempted fraud. You have abused the court's time and my patience." As the gavel fell, a powerful sense of closure washed over me. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the truth. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I had it. The victory wasn't just in the legal ruling. It was in the quiet, dignified way I had exposed their lies. I had fought not with emotion, but with intellect, and I had won. As the gavel fell, a profound silence descended upon me. It was a silence not of despair, but of immense relief. I had won. But the victory felt bittersweet. It wasn't a celebration, it was a burial. I was burying my husband's lies and the family I had clung to for so long. Outside the courtroom, a small crowd of reporters had gathered. Marcus expertly handled their questions, shielding me from the media frenzy. He was my protector, a man who had helped me reclaim my life without a single word of unnecessary emotion. Then I saw them, my parents. They were standing by the courthouse steps, looking utterly defeated. My mother was crying, her mascara streaking down her face. My father looked older than I had ever seen him, the confident smirk he wore at Eleanor's party gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed emptiness. As I walked past, my mother reached for my hand. "Olivia, sweetheart," she sobbed. "We didn't know Eleanor was lying. We want to make things right. It's been so hard since you stopped sending the monthly money." Her words were like a final, cruel twist of the knife. In that moment, I saw them not as my parents, but as opportunists who had been caught in their own web of greed. Their concern wasn't for me, but for the financial lifeline I had cut off. I simply held up my hand to stop her. "Don't," I said, my voice cold and firm. "Just don't." Right there, in front of them and the world, I took out my phone, went to their contacts, and blocked their numbers. Then I walked away, not a single glance back. They were no longer my family. They were a part of a past I was determined to leave behind. Standing by my car was Evelyn, Julian's mother. She didn't say a word. She just looked at me with a warmth and sincerity I had never felt from my own mother. To my surprise, I laughed, a real laugh that felt foreign to my lips. "You know what?" I said, taking a deep breath of the cold Chicago air. "I think I am. Or at least, I will be." I looked at her, a thought forming in my mind. "I've been thinking about that downtown apartment Julian left me. I never really liked it. Too many memories. But maybe you'd like it?" Evelyn's eyes widened, a look of shock on her face. "Olivia, no, I couldn't possibly," she began. "Please," I said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "You gave me my life back with those medical records. You gave me the truth. Let me give you something in return." A week later, I handed her the keys. She started crying and hugged me tightly. "I never thought I'd have a daughter," she whispered. Her words, so simple and true, were the first step in my healing journey. It was an unexpected connection, born from the ruins of our shared betrayal. 4 months have passed since the trial. My old family still tries to contact me through distant relatives and mutual friends, but I have cut those ties too. Eleanor even sent a letter, claiming she was sorry, that she had changed, and that she needed help with the baby. I didn't even bother to open it. I threw it away, unopened. The old me might have felt a flicker of sympathy, but the new me knew better. A leopard doesn't change its spots, and Eleanor's apologies were just another con. Instead of looking back, I've started building my new life. I now have weekly dinners with Evelyn. We're slowly getting to know each other, sharing stories about Julian, the good and the bad. She's helping me understand that while he wasn't the man I believed him to be, he wasn't a monster either. There was a part of him that was real, and that doesn't erase all the happy moments we shared. This shared grief has brought us closer, creating a bond that is stronger and more authentic than any I had ever known. I've also gone back to work full-time. The initial whispers at the office are gone, replaced by a new kind of respect. The woman who returned to her desk wasn't the same woman who had left in tears. The old Olivia had a job. The new Olivia had a purpose. I launched a new initiative at my firm, a pro bono financial consulting service for women who are struggling with difficult life transitions. My own story, once a source of shame, had become my greatest strength. It was the proof that I understood their struggles and could help them navigate their own financial independence. I've also started doing things just for me. I joined a hiking club and discovered the breathtaking beauty of the trails outside Chicago. I've started planning my first solo vacation, a trip to Italy. It's an adventure I'm planning for no one but myself. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I barely recognize the woman staring back at me. She's stronger, more self-aware, and her eyes hold a quiet fire that wasn't there before. The pain hasn't completely gone away, but it no longer defines me. It has become a part of my story, a scar that reminds me of my resilience. I lost the family I was born into, but I found a new one in the most unexpected way. Evelyn is more than Julian's mother. She is the mother I always needed. Her unconditional love is a balm for my wounded heart. We spent last weekend clearing out the last of Julian's things from storage. It was an emotional and cathartic process. Evelyn told me stories of Julian as a little boy, before the lies began. It helped me put the pieces of his life together, to believe that a good part of him once existed. With her help, I donated his things to charity, a final act of letting go. This is not the life I planned. I never wanted to be a widow. I never wanted to discover my husband's betrayal and my family's greed. But in the wreckage of my old life, I have found a strength and a purpose I never knew I had. My marriage might have been a lie, but the woman who emerged from it is real. My new life is not a continuation of the old one. It's a completely new chapter, a testament to the fact that you can rebuild your life from the ashes, brick by brick. The final act of my story isn't about revenge. It's about legacy. It's about building something real out of the wreckage of a lie. The victory in that courtroom wasn't the end of a battle. It was the beginning of a war for myself. I didn't just win back my home and my financial security. I won back my identity. The woman who walked out of that courthouse wasn't just a widow. She was a survivor. My silence had been mistaken for weakness, my grief for a breakdown. But they were all wrong. I was quiet because I was gathering my strength. I was a strategist, not a victim. I've since learned that the most powerful form of revenge isn't to tear someone else down, but to build yourself up so high they can never touch you again. I've started a new chapter of my life, one that is truly mine, built on my own terms. My pro bono financial consulting service for women is more than a job. It's a mission. I sit with women from all walks of life, those going through divorces, those facing financial hardship, those who are just starting out, and I teach them what I learned the hard way. I teach them to be their own advocates. I teach them the difference between joint and separate assets, the importance of a prenuptial agreement, and how to read the fine print. I empower them to protect themselves, not just from betrayal, but from the naive belief that love is enough to conquer all. My own story, once a source of shame, has become my greatest tool. It's a testament to the fact that you can lose everything and still come out stronger. My relationship with Evelyn has blossomed into a beautiful, unexpected mother-daughter bond. She is the mother I always craved, the one who sees my strength, not my utility. We spend our weekends together, exploring Chicago, sharing stories, and laughing. She has become my confidant, my rock, and my biggest cheerleader. Just last week, she told me that Julian would be so proud of the woman I have become, and for the first time, hearing his name didn't sting. It was a moment of grace, a quiet acceptance that his legacy, for me, is no longer about his lies, but about the strength I found in the aftermath. I'm no longer defined by the man I married or the family I lost. I am defined by the woman I have become, the woman who stood up for herself when no one else would, the woman who turned her pain into purpose. My life now is not a continuation of the one I had. It's a completely new book, and I am the author. I look at the framed letter from Julian that hangs on my wall, a letter he wrote to me when we were first dating, filled with promises and dreams. I used to look at it with bitterness, a painful reminder of his lies. Now, I look at it as a symbol of my own resilience. It reminds me that I once believed in a love that was real, and that my capacity for love and trust wasn't a flaw. It was a strength that was abused. The letter doesn't define me anymore. It simply marks the beginning of a long journey, a journey that has led me to a place of peace, power, and genuine happiness. My story isn't an isolated incident, it's a message to women everywhere. You are not a victim. Your intuition is a superpower. Your financial independence is your ultimate safety net. I hope my story resonates with you. Have you ever had to find the strength to start over? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more content that celebrates female empowerment and resilience. Your support means the world to me and helps me continue sharing these powerful messages of resilience and hope. Thank you.